Either they're completely ignorant or they're evil. And ignorant is the best choice we got. Here we are, we're going sovereign, okay? And we've got a special guest speaker today, Justice Anna. Now, she's a prolific historian, Justice of the Alaska Assembly, and fiduciary of the United States of America, the real United States of America, the unincorporated nation of federal states. Tireless worker, helping teams to bring remedy and relief to Americans. I mean, I'm so excited. I got so many questions for you. And also we're with Diane Kaiser, ex-pro soccer player turned functional diagnostic nutrition, professional coach, author of Killer Breast, which I mean, if you've had those or know somebody that's had, you got to get a thermography. You got to see what's going on with them.
Breast implants, yeah.
Oh yeah, the breast implants, it's nuts. Okay, and Dennis Nell. Currently serves as Justice of the State, Sheriff of Yavapai County in Arizona, recorder and coordinator of the Arizona Assembly. Thank you for everyone being here. Okay, now, if you're watching this on YouTube, we've got an editor because in our socialist, no, I can't say that. Okay, in our current government now, where the freedom of press is not respected, okay, but also, if you look at the Weimar Republic and the Soviets, they also had freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of the press. Yeah, it didn't work out well for those guys either. Okay, so if you hear a bleep during this, okay, you're going to see the full version on the Dr. B VIP, but we're going to have to answer some questions that might be uncomfortable for some of the censors. Okay, but they're actually valuable for you. Did you ever think I'd have to say that in America?
No, but you are.
You know?
Wait, but you're a doctor. You're allowed to say whatever you want. Oh, you're the wrong kind of doctor. Never mind.
Wrong kind of doctor. And even the right kind of doctor, the medical doctor, okay, the more drug guy, okay, they can't even say that. They're being beat up. Okay, now, Justice Anna, can you briefly state in like 3 to 5 minute synopsis of the assembly?
Okay.
And share your background too, if you can, because I mean, your work I'm familiar with, and I'm just, it's like goosebumps talking to you.
Well, basically, I am a great grandmother from Big Lake, Alaska, and that's all I claim, in terms of my persona. My work is pretty intense, and it developed over a long period of time and long period of study. I started out life as a mathematics person. I was very much into mathematics and hard science, and I got tracked off into law by a series of accidents, basically. And those accidents began with watching a C-SPAN segment where Nelson Rockefeller was being questioned by the Congress to have his appointment as Jerry Ford's vice president approved. And in that process, he was asked, Mr. Rockefeller, how much money did you make last year? And he said something that for those times was outrageous amount of money. He said something like $480 million. And, everybody kind of went, yeah, well, we all know the Rockefellers are richer than Midas. So, that's no big surprise. And then they asked, how much federal income tax did you pay last year? And Nelson just sat there like a brick and said, none. All of the air in the room kind of sucked out the doors. And then they kind of regrouped after a moment, and this guy who was doing the speaking asked, are we to understand that you made $480 million last year and you paid no federal income taxes? And again, Nelson just sat there proud as a pig and said, none. And then again, the air again went right out of the room, and then they just kind of glossed it over and went on with other questions. And I'm sitting there. I was a teenager at the time, working some horrible, teenager job, and getting my paycheck docked royally for FICA and all these other things. I'm thinking there's something wrong. There's something definitely wrong that this guy can make that kind of money and pay no taxes, and yet they're down here docking some poor waitress for 25% of hers. Okay? That really stuck in my brain, and it would not let go. I remembered it, and it kept poking at me. It was like this knife in the middle of my brain that kept hitting over time. And so it was from that beginning and that realization that everything else came. I eventually unraveled the Irs scam, and it is a scam, at least so far as Americans are concerned. And then the history and how we got into this situation. And fundamentally, there are three populations in this country. There are Americans, such as we all grew up thinking of ourselves, right? There are U.S. citizens who are British territorial citizens who are supposed to be in this country providing us with essential governmental services. And there are municipal employees who are basically citizens of the worldwide municipal government of the city of Rome, which is administered by the Roman Pontiff, an office in the Holy See, so the Roman Catholic Church. And we are unaware of these three populations. We're never taught a thing about them.
Now, are they aware of themselves? Like, are they aware that they're designated as that? No, we're never taught a thing about this. And yet those three different populations exist under different conditions and are totally separate. So essentially, Americans do not stand under any constitution. Americans stand under the Declaration of Independence. Then there are these three federal constitutions, one of which is dormant and has been dormant since the 1860s. And then there are these two subcontractors that are foreign. And the foreign subcontractors have citizens. So you've got British territorial citizens, and you've got Papist municipal citizens who are employees of ours. But they're living here with us, doing different jobs, okay, for the government. So what happened was that gradually over time, the mess that happened during the Civil War was never actually cleaned up. The Reconstruction that we heard about in, American History 101 was never completed. We were given the impression that it was all done and over long ago, but it never actually happened. And instead, a consistent state of emergency was engendered because of that. And so they kept making all these emergency proclamations and declarations of war, Every 2 years, the president has to declare war against something to keep this going. All right? So, we've had the war on drugs and the war on property and the war on war, and it's all just bogus, legalistic, international law stuff to keep a war going, a mercenary war, as it turns out, in this country. So I'm sitting here looking at this and going, well, this is absolutely bad, crazy. we're being confused with our employees, We're the employers, but we're being registered as employees and then treated like employees and being held accountable for all the statutory law and stuff that they're supposed to be administering when it doesn't have anything to do with us. And so, part of the censorship protocol that we're all dealing with right now in this country is actually being applied
by employees against people that they assume are employees. See, that's how they're getting around, they're evading their constitutional obligations by pretending that we are in a different political status. See, the British territorial citizens don't have any constitutional rights, never did. They're not parties to the Constitution. The Papist municipal employees don't have any constitutional rights, never did. Again, they're not parties to the Constitution. It's the Americans who are parties to the Constitution, and we are parties to the Constitution as employers of these other yahoos.
So is that one of the reasons to change your status so
Yeah.
that you get protected by the Constitution, and
Yes.
then you can then they're working for us?
Right.
That's how I thought it always
you-
was. I thought it was always like that.
Okay, so you just step back and you go, wait a minute, I'm the employer here, they're the employee. How come they're bossing me around? All right, so once you figure that out, you're in a position to go, okay, well, something's messed up here. And what is it? How is this happening? Well, it's because we were registered as babies, as US citizens, as British territorial citizens. And that's what happened when they issued a birth certificate for us. Okay, there are certain words you need to learn here. Registration always, 100% of the time, implies that you are giving something away. All right? You're giving something to whatever organization or person you are registering with. All right? So when your mother innocently signs the paperwork at the hospital saying that you are a US citizen, guess what happens? All of a sudden, the wheels start turning and their organization comes in and says, okay, well, you're a US citizen and a subject of the Queen and a member of the Commonwealth, and you are an officer or you are a dependent of the British territorial government. And from now on, you are going to march, and everything that you own is going to belong to the Queen. You're going to be a tenant on any land that you acquire, and she is going to have the land and give you a title to it because you are a British citizen. And she's going to hold that land in trust for you while you're working in America.
Didn't we fight a war to get the Brits out? How do they still have control over us?
How did they get their foot back through the door? Well, it happened in the negotiations to end the War of Independence. They got some concessions and they got a contract to provide governmental services, which was very juicy. And they got an agreement that the British monarch would continue to be our trustee on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. So what happens, for example, with the Marine Corps right now is that they're American controlled on the land, but when they are on the Great Lakes or 15 miles offshore, presto, bango, changeo, they're now under the control of the Queen. Same thing happens to the Navy. When they come into our home ports, they're ours. When they go back out to sea and hit that 15-mile international limit, poof, they're Brits. And it's been that way since the end of the original revolution. And that's just part of it. But anyway, that's how they got their foot back in the door, is that there were concessions made at the end, by treaty, at the end of the War of Independence, that allowed the British monarch and the Brits in general to continue having a presence here, to maintain their physical interests, and to be here, to provide essential government services.
Okay, now this was one of the hardest things that I had to research this one. And because I saw the Mel Gibson movie, okay, and it looked like it was a resounding victory. But I didn't know that when we signed it was a negotiated peace. They still had control of New York. They had control of some major cities, and they tied in our treaty with the French. So It wasn't Mel Gibson kicking ass. Okay,
no, it was not. It definitively was not. And, that's the image that we're all fed, but that isn't what happened. The constitutions are not what people think they are. The constitutions are kind of a multitude serving contract, but they're fundamentally a commercial service contract with different subcontractors and a national trust that was established by the preamble, which was added 3 years after the actual commercial contract was signed. Different jurisdiction, right? And then you have the Bill of Rights, which was also added later as a stipulation to make sure everybody agreed on some of the rights that we were going to be guaranteed as Americans. And then finally, you have a whole structure that sets up exactly who is going to be providing these services and how they're going to be provided, and all the things that we think of as the federal government came into existence as a separate entity from the American government. Most people think that the federal government is our government, but really it's not. Americans have their whole separate government that is the contractor agreeing with other foreign principals to set up this whole federal system. We're the employers. We're the principals on the American side who signed and approved the constitutional subcontractors. So it's a whole different thing than what people think. It's a business document. There's nothing sacrosanct about the constitutions from our side. They were negotiated. They can be unnegotiated, and we know who we were negotiating with. We were negotiating with the Lord Mayor, with the Queen, and with the Pope. Those three. So, it is not this big mystique. People argue about this and they say, oh, you're full of it. Well, read your Constitution. Read it with new eyes. Look at it for what it is. It's just a contract. It's the implementation of these treaties that were hashed out following the Revolutionary War. It's a result. It's not a beginning, it's an end. And so, looking at it from that standpoint, the only reason that the constitutions are so sacrosanct is because of our employees. Our British and our Papist employees need those constitutions because that's their bread and butter. That's their ability to be able to stay in this country and work in this country. That's why the constitutions are so sacrosanct to them. That's why they swear their pledge of allegiance to the constitutions. That's the whole thing is about them keeping their dinner ticket. That's what that's about.
I thought the Constitution was meant to put a rein on the government, to control the government, so they wouldn't get out of line.
Exactly. That's why we did it. That's why the Americans put the constitutions in place, was to define the role and set the limits on our subcontractors.
You know what? That's one of the reasons I got into this, because I thought that we had freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. And when they close churches and leave gun stores and liquor stores open, which is fine because I'm a shooter and a drinker. So, but still, I like going to church, and it just didn't make sense.
People look at me and they say, "Oh, you're crazy. The federal government is nothing but a subcontractor government. It's just a bunch of people out there for hire services." Yeah, that's right. It's nothing but a contract government. It's all under contract. It's 100% a matter of contract, where we, the American people, contracted with them to provide services for us. And the constitutions are the contracts. Okay, so then you look at the constitutions and you find that there are 3 of them, and there are 3 federal contractors. Okay, so we got 3 contracts, you got 3 contractors. It makes total sense. So we have 3 federal subcontractors. And why are they called? Okay, first of all, here's a nice little linchpin for people. We've got hold of a 1824 Webster's Dictionary, which is about as old as Webster's Dictionary can get. And it says right there, among the meanings of federal is contract. A contract government. All right? And that is, there's a real big clue, folks, that back then, when these things were signed, people knew that they were contracting for services. Our forefathers actually knew that they were doing that, and they knew who they were contracting for those services with, and they set it up accordingly. And then you're prepared for the next big thing. We're hardly mentioned in the constitutions. We just make a couple little side bit, appearances, like an actor walking across the back of the stage in a play, right? We hardly show up in the constitutions. We, Americans, America, are not the subject of the constitutions. The constitutions are about our subcontractors and how our subcontractors are supposed to conduct their business and what they're supposed to guarantee to us. Okay? So now that you're beginning to get the idea here that we're the employers, the long lost employers, no less, you're prepared for the next bit. Here the American government is with these 3 federal subcontractors operating under 3 constitutions, and everything's going along huckle-de-buck. We're fine. And then a little thing called the Civil War comes along. All right, so originally there were 3 federal subcontractors. There was the States of America, which was an American organization. We had the United States of America with a small THE, right, which was the British territorial subcontractor. And we had the United States, which was, again, the municipal government subcontractor. After the Civil War, the American subcontractor disappeared. They went into dormancy. They were no longer operating. That left us with just the British territorial subcontractor and the Holy Roman Empire subcontractor in operation. Okay? Now, what should have happened is that everybody should have been told, okay, well, here we are. This is our situation. The States of America organization, the American subcontractor, which was a business, went bankrupt. They're in reorganization. Nobody has anything to say about it except the Americans, us. But we didn't know that we were supposed to. We didn't know what had happened. you've got all these millions of Americans out there back in the day when there wasn't an internet and there wasn't a telephone line and there was barely even a telegraph service. And so you had all of these people who are absolutely clueless about what's going on in Washington, D.C. in the wake of the Civil War. We were never told. And instead, what happened is that Abraham Lincoln had left the U.S. Army in charge of our money. He had signed the first executive order ever called General Order 100, the Lieber Code, in March of 1863, just before he bankrupted the northern states of America. States of America, get that? Northern states of America. He bankrupted the northern states of America, and just before he did it, he handed over responsibility to the military. So we've been under a military junta, basically, for 160 years. And that military government cut deals with the Queen and the Pope. And as a result, bit by bit and piece by piece, everything has gotten more and more corrupted. And the lawlessness and the, just the misdirection, misinformation, it's all been getting worse and worse and worse. And the lies have been getting deeper and deeper. And with the lies have come the abuses. And they basically enslaved everyone with the Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration. Now, when we first started talking about this, I told you how we're impersonated as British territorial citizens because of the birth certificate and registering us as U.S. citizens. So we're being impersonated. That's a crime. What they're doing is a crime. It's a crime under international law, and it's been a crime forever. I mean, it was a crime when they first started it back in the 1800s, but it has been outlawed worldwide since 1926. So, and it's actually it's a gross violation of the Hague Conventions and the Geneva Conventions.
Okay, now Anna, the history, I got to tell you, I'm a big fan because I'm a firm believer that if you don't learn from it, you're going to repeat it. And I'm seeing stupid stuff repeated over and over again. And like, I would love to have somebody that knows a heck of a lot more about this stuff ask you another question. But Diane, do you have anything that you want to ask Anna? Because this is like a golden moment.
Yeah, Anna.
I mean, I'm going 3 constitutions. I know of 2. I mean, I want to find the third one. There's anytime I talk to you or hear you, I got to go in there. The Treaty of 1861, the Treaty of 1779. I know those. I read those. It's all valid. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think I'd like to, pull it back and bring what you're sharing here, Anna, to the people in terms of how does this relate to me? How does this apply to me? And what can I now do with it? Because I know that right now time is of the essence. We have a lot of people who have taken the experimental jab, whatever word we can use for it, the experimental kill shot, whatever. And we have people who are paying taxes. We have people who have children who are going to school. They're afraid to go sovereign because if they do, then that might mean that their child can't go to school. There's a lot of people who, what I've been talking about going sovereign for almost a year now. I've known about it for 15, but for a year now, I've been speaking with Dennis weekly, John, Dr. B weekly, and people are still, even very, very awake people that I know are saying, I get what you're saying. I get what Anna's saying, but I couldn't possibly do that because if I don't pay taxes, then haven't you heard about the people out there who are getting arrested and taken to jail for not paying taxes? Didn't you hear that one guy? And so there's all this talk about it, right? Then there's people who are really concerned. I hear this one the most. You probably do too, Anna. But I'd like to address it out there on Dr. B's channel. If I go sovereign, then my child can no longer go to public school and they'll kill me. They love public school, not the parent, child. And we know that it's more of a prison camp, and that are being raised for children as troops. And then the third one is that people are afraid, what if my employer finds out? Or custody battles with my child. And what Dennis and I have been talking about is that people who are going, well, now I'm in a custody battle with my child because I'm considered negligent and abusive because I'm not giving my child the experimental kill shot. But yet my significant other says that I'm being negligent and I'm actually killing the child and exposing the child. And now the courts are all in it. And you've got multiple judges and multiple attorneys and people bleeding dry to the point of having no more money left because they're fighting these wars. And I think, what if you just go sovereign? Does that resolve everything?
Well, remember what I told you about them keeping a mercenary war going?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what they do is they put us in the middle. They confer arbitrary citizenship. Citizenship is an obligation to serve the government. And, we have state citizens who serve the state government in our government, but they have U.S. citizens and citizens of the United States. That's the municipal designation. So what they do is they very cleverly confer dual federal citizenship on us almost at birth. And we are then deemed to be obligated to obey all of the rules, statutes, codes, regulations of all sorts, which their employees have to observe. That number of rules, codes, statutes, and regulations is now up to 80 million.
Mm-hmm. Including the new ones for people to get vaccinated.
They misidentify us as British territorial citizens and as Papist municipal citizens, both. They set up the pillars, okay? And it's like a game of Kippy-Way. You're the fool in the middle. You're the piggy in the middle, the punching bag in the middle. And so what they've contrived by collusion, and we have the proof of the collusion, is that they work together like a pack of hunting dogs, okay? One of them, the municipal government, will address you as you're standing there going, and will say, you're guilty of, infraction, blah, 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 against the Arkansas State Code, blah, 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 right? So they haul you into a municipal code to face a magistrate judge, and you are already then considered, number one, a citizen of the municipal United States, 2, a criminal, and 3, already guilty. Already prejudged before you even walk in the door, okay? And you don't know this. So you have virtually no chance of walking out of there except in chains as a prisoner, or being fined, or having to go through all the turkey trot that they can throw at you and all the fees they can impose upon you. And they do this for profit.
So you're saying if you go sovereign, then that wouldn't be the case. Because I think people that see people who are sovereign go into those courts, the same thing is happening to them. So what, just to put some fires out of skepticism out there.
Okay, the ultimate answer is that you get outside this gate and you get to the point where you are competent to address your employees appropriately. To identify yourself as the employer, number one, to identify yourself as an American, and to put them in their place, put them back in their box. And, this has been a long, hard process because they are making tremendous money off of impersonating you and then knowingly bringing false charges against you in court.
Not to mention the taxes that we're paying. So you've also mentioned that we're the last generation to pay taxes. Can you talk more about that?
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we shouldn't have been paying taxes at all because we're the landowners. We don't owe anything to the Queen. We're not her subjects. So all this impersonation and barratry are both called crimes of personation. and they're well known. And that's what they've been doing to us in these courts. They've been deliberately impersonating us as Brits and as citizens of Rome. And they've been prosecuting us under foreign law. And that's how they've been making tremendous money. Let me give you an example. You're an American, you're peaceably going about your business. You have 4 kids, your wife dies, and suddenly you're a single father with 4 kids, okay? The wife's got a screw loose sister who thinks that she should have custody of your children. So she calls up CPS and says, this guy is a drunk and a drug addict and he molests his daughter and, all this stuff, right? Anonymous tip. So what happens? CPS comes in, swoops up your kids, and away they go. And you're given all these tests to take. You have to get a mental evaluation that you have to pay for. You have to get a drug test that you have to take. You have to have a piss test every, day practically. And, they just put you through this incredible ringer. But what they don't tell you is they're getting $6,000 a day for those children, for keeping those kids.
Per child?
Per child.
So it's $24,000.
$24,000 a day.
Times 30, that's $600,000.
Wow.
Who pays for that?
Child.
Is the taxpayer paying for that? Lovely.
And so the money is pouring in, and those poor little darlings are being treated like dirt. And they're being put through all the ringer too, and terrorized and poked and medically examined and subjected to all sorts of shrinks asking them questions like, did your father touch you inappropriately? And then the little kid sitting there going, what's inappropriate? You got the picture? This is big money for them. This is what they're working.
But I want to pay taxes because it's going to bridges and streets. And how dare you not pay taxes? It's just so selfish of you. Like, who do you think you are? You're above the law?
Right.
That's what I hear a lot.
Oh, yeah, right.
It's for the naysayers. And they really do think that when we pay our taxpayers dollars, it is going for the common good.
No, it's going to cronies is what it's going to. It's going
the percentage is going to the good versus the cronies. Do you have an idea, Anna?
For example, we did an initial study some years ago, and we found out that 98% of all foreign aid never actually reaches the people it's supposed to reach.
98%.
98%. Only
2%.
2% reaches the destination. The rest all get siphoned off. And, you may have heard that we have something outrageous, $23 trillion trade deficit with China, right? How is that a trade deficit if we've been trading them our labor and our money for their goods? Do we imagine that the Chinese just gave us $23 trillion worth of stuff and never asked for payment? Yeah, right. I'm sure that Peking would just, jump over barrel horses and try to get to us, just give us $23 trillion worth of stuff, right? No, they were being paid every moment of the day, every step of the way. Americans were here at our cash registers doling out our labor for their Chinese goods. There's no trade deficit. That's bull. And there's no national debt either. Have you ever looked at, you remember, you might not be old enough, but there used to be a big, like a ticker tape thing that was constantly rolling over the numbers of how fast the national debt was going. And it was just piling up these huge, huge numbers day after day after day. And you're sitting there watching it spin and you're going, oh my, that's impossible. That's just, the amount of money owed is just so incredibly huge. And then one day I lifted my hand and I said, oh, there's no national debt. You can't have a national debt in the debt credit system, because think about the transaction. It's a zero-sum transaction. The moment you create a debt, you create a credit, and it zeroes out. So here's the $100,000, or shall we say $25 trillion question. Where is the national credit to answer that national debt? Oh, well, they just weren't accounting for it. They weren't offsetting the national credit against the national debt. And so, of course, they were racking up the appearance of this gigantic debt that doesn't, in fact, exist. So they've been using, all sorts of devious accounting practices that are complete horse hooey. And nobody was minding the shop. Everybody was taking the money. Everybody was siphoning off, embezzling on an absolutely humongous level.
So that's where our taxpayers' dollars are going, is to just fund the crooks. I mean, I think it's so important for people. In order for people to truly take this seriously, you have to understand how much you've been lied to and blindsided to, where their money's really going, because they think they're paying for schools. They think they're paying for protection. They think they're paying to build the cities that we all drive on. But that's like, where is it really going, Anna?
Well, I'll give you an example of it. You know the big flap about police brutality and all of that's gone on, and defunding the police and the backlash against the police? Well, guess what? The police are not obligated to protect us. The police are private security agents that are employed by corporations in the business of providing us with governmental services. So if they see you being raped or murdered, they're not obligated to come to your assistance. What they are obligated to do is to protect the property and the officials of the corporation, because they're no longer public peace officers. They are for-hire law enforcement officers. And a lot of the law enforcement officers have no concept that that's their status. They still think that they're peacekeeping officers like in the Old West, but they're not. They're taking a corporate paycheck. They're filling a corporate office. They have no public role or responsibility or anything at all. And if you want to get the law enforcement in this country legally, from a legal perspective, are the equivalent of any private security service, any bunch of robber baron thugs. Okay, that's their legal status. They're allowed to be here because of something that happened just after the Civil War, the Pinkerton laws. Do you remember from any history you've ever read that the big trains that were going to the West after the Civil War, the Transcontinental Railroad and all of the offshoots, right? And you remember Jesse James and all these outlaw gangs were robbing the railroads, right? So the railroads went to Congress and they said, we need our own forces, our own police forces to be able to counteract the outlaws that are attacking our payrolls and preventing us from doing business in the West and causing all this trouble. So the then territorial Congress said, well, of course, we're all for big business. We're going to help you guys out. We're going to allow you to have your own private police forces on the ground here in America. Bad idea, but they did it. And those Pinkerton laws allowed the railroads to hire a British agency, and it's called the Pinkerton Agency. It's still in existence, to come in here and provide what? Agents. Well, that's where that word first got introduced. Agents to ride the rails and kill outlaws that tried to steal the gold payroll shipments that were going back and forth to California.
Now, Anna, one of the things that Dennis, because Dennis is a sheriff, one thing that he's told me, and this is because it seems overwhelming, he said that county sheriffs have the most power. They could kick out the FBI, the CIA, and that county sheriffs are, I mean, these are we're seeing county sheriffs at the open border we have now. So they're like independent. Dennis, what do you, because we know that the police are a contract, but are the sheriffs different? Can we communicate with them to have us like, have a police force in there that's legit, that protects American citizens, not just the U.S. corporate interest?
Well, the whole problem there is that the sheriffs that are here now are incorporated counties. So they're just another corporation. The real sheriffs are from the assemblies, and they are elected by the people in the assemblies to uphold the law for Americans. And they are the chief law enforcement officer of each county. Well, of course, their county, but we have 15 counties in Arizona, so we would need 15 different sheriffs all working in their county. And they have the overall authority in that county. So the ones that are there now, they're corporate sheriffs because they have been incorporated, because they started receiving funds from the federal government and the corporations. So they work for the corporations. And so if you ask one of the sheriffs now that's, whether it's Maricopa County, Yavapai County, Coconino, whoever, they're going to say, you can ask them if they're a constitutional sheriff, and they'll say, well, yeah, we can. Okay, but they uphold the corporate laws and statutes that Anna was talking about, the 80 million plus regulations.
Right.
Wow.
They're not public officers. They're not peacekeeping officers. There's a difference. If you're a public peacekeeping officer like Dennis here, then you are upholding the public law. Okay? Things like murder, rape, armed theft, those sorts of things. Injury crimes where your property or your body's being harmed, where you're injured, right? That's what we need. We need peacekeeping officers. But what we've got instead are corporate employees who can enforce the Constitution, but don't have to. There's a Supreme Court case called Mack and Prinz, Prinz, versus USA Inc. Okay. And this was brought by Sheriff Richard Mack many years ago and his fellow officer, a man named Prinz, against the USA Inc., which is one of the various British territorial corporations that provide governmental services. Okay. And the Supreme Court, the territorial Supreme Court, I should say, came back and said, well, yeah, it's up to your discretion whether you enforce the Constitution or not. Literally. That's official. There are a couple of other cases, I can't remember right off the top of my head all the details, but there are other cases that prove that, according to the Supreme Court, these officers who are corporate employees do not have to come to your assistance. If you're being beaten, killed, set on fire, whatever, they can just stand there across the street at their discretion and not come to your assistance and not be penalized for it. And yet they're on your payroll.
Don't they have to take an oath to preserve and protect and defend the Constitution? Foreign individuals?
Not anymore. Hasn't been that way for many years.
I like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors too.
They don't have a bond. The corporations that they work for self-insure, which means they don't have any insurance and they don't have any ability to bond anybody. So these guys are out there thinking that they are, like Andy Griffith, like they have a bond and they have a official public office and all that stuff, and they don't. Their butts are hanging way out in the wind as far as personal liability goes. And more of them are realizing it and they're quitting. So then what happens? Then we don't have anybody out there doing anything at all to enforce any sort of law, and anarchy persists. And that's why it's an urgent matter that we actually bring together our peacekeeping officials, our public officers, so that you can at the very least, invoke your public law and be able to deputize members of the community to protect the community against looters and murderers and drug dealers and all the other ugly things.
Yeah, and I'd like to just ask, as we're wrapping up here, one of the things that we were talking about before Kat and I were creating these questions is the way I position going sovereign is that if we don't do this quickly, then there is going to be a lot of anarchy. There's going to be a lot more pushback than we realize. So maybe a two-part question that you could answer is, why is it so dangerous right now to do nothing, to not go sovereign and to reclaim our freedoms and remain a US citizen in the de facto? And then in your opinion, I mentioned a couple of them earlier, but what are the greatest barriers for people to changing their status that you have seen? And what current solutions do we have to help support people to get beyond those roadblocks and barriers in their mind?
Well, we've been working at this process for many years, so we do know the international law, we know the history, we know how we got here, we know how to unravel it. There are basic principles called maxims of law, and we have followed the principles, the logic of law to create a process that Dennis is very familiar with that unravels the presumption of US and municipal citizenship and records. There's a difference between recording and registration. Remember, registration, you give something away to whoever you registered it with. When you record something, you retain the ownership. You're just making a public record of your interest, right? So first and foremost, you want to record your interest in your kids, because otherwise the government owns them. That's how CPS can come in and steal your kids and charge you $6,000 a day. That, all of this it's all money. It's all the commercial. It's all about money and commerce and getting and bilking and plundering and pillaging and privateering on the Americans.
That's and that could be the next step. That could be next step for kids that they want to mandate the vaccine. And if your child is vaccinated,
they can mandate a vaccine for their employees as a condition of employment.
Without correct, you mean if we don't correct our status?
If you don't correct your status, they can mandate that as a condition of employment. They can mandate that as a condition of dependency.
Mm-hmm.
And so they say, oh, you're a US citizen. We own you. You have to do what we say. Roll up your sleeve. It's just like going into the service. You go in there, you sign up voluntarily. You sign up for a 4-year tour of duty in the US Marine Corps, okay? They own you for 4 years. They agree to pay you. They agree to give you such and such, education or, whatever the deal is, okay? But it's a deal. You go in there, you go to the recruitment office, you sign up, and then for the next 4 years, they own you. They literally own you. They can tell you to jump off a cliff. They can tell you to roll up your sleeve. They can, and they do. They experiment on our troops in the most ghastly way, and they get away with it because we're dead asleep and not opposing it. And if you don't oppose it, then they get away with it. That's the way their law works. Their law is not our public law. Their law is a wild west kind of whatever you can get away with is okay. And they function under Roman civil law as if they were the kingdom of Rome. And they say things like, let him who will be deceived be deceived. So if they can deceive you and get you to sign a contract, then they will enforce that contract any way they please until you object again. And since you're a slave who's already condemned and already judged guilty as a municipal citizen, they can do damn near anything they want to you.
Anna, we were supposed to finish at 1 o'clock, but we're like 10 minutes over. Do you have final words? Because where can people hook up with you? Where can we get involved in this movement? And please be very, very clear on this, that if you do not get involved in this movement, you don't have freedom. You're not protected by the Constitution, and whatever way the federal government wants to push you, you're going to have to go that way. This way gives you independence. And how can they get a hold of you or get involved with this?
The quickest, easiest way is to go to www.theamericanstatesassembly.net. And from there, you can find your state coordinators, and they will then be able to help you do the paperwork. And it's a very simple process. It takes, I don't know, maybe a couple hours at most to do the basic process. And then you're a member of the assembly, and you can get a state credential card that says, I'm an American, thank you. Sorry for any miscommunications. Yeah, right. And you can start coming home. I call it coming home. You know? And we need all the help we can get from people who understand that, hey, no, ours is not a hierarchical system. Most people go into the assembly and they think that the chairman of the assembly, if they've elected one already, is the CEO. But no, the chairman of one of our assemblies is a spokesperson for the assembly. It's a whole different role.
It's what it's supposed to be. The government that governs the best governs the least. Many times have we heard that?
The concept of we're all in charge and we're all responsible for making this work is difficult for a lot of new people. And I just want to observe, there are 3 choices. And if you're not comfortable with a non-hierarchical, community-based, mom and pop kind of attitude, and I'm equal to you and you're equal to me, and we're all here together, and this is we're all brothers in arms, if you will, and we're in it together. All right. If you can't accept that and you're looking for structure, you want somebody over you to tell you exactly what to do every 5 minutes of the day. If that's what you're yearning for, there are 3 choices. You can join your state assembly and you can build it up and you can make it work. You're Americans, you know how to make things work in the worst and most dire circumstances. Okay? So you can do this. You can join your state assembly and you can make that assembly be a wonderful shining light and beacon and a bulwark of safety and freedom for you and your kids. Or you can trot down the road and you can join the nearest district assembly, and by doing so, admit and adopt the status of a British territorial indentured servant and be a subject of the Queen. Okay? And your third choice is you can go join the municipal district assembly, the nearest one, and there you can thereby adopt the status of a slave to the Pope. There are your choices.
You just got to choose. Oh my God. Anna, this has been amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. This is going to inspire people because they got to be inspired. And all those people who are listening, look for the next couple of months. There's going to be a cyber attack. So make sure you get water, food, clothing, shelter. If that is enough, like a slap in the back of the head to say, hey, look, it's time to make a decision, because right now you're in one of those 3 assemblies. You are, right. And you choose which one. Okay, I got to thank you so much. I mean, Anna, you are the greatest celebrity. I've heard so much about you, and I didn't believe half of the stuff you said. So then I went and researched it, and I believe 100% of what you say. Always, it's always been, one on top of another, that it's like, oh my God, it really is that the structure that you described is absolutely accurate. If anybody has any questions, please do the research. But thank you very much for everyone being here. And I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Dr. B. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you, Anna. If you can hear my voice, you are part of the resistance.